Making money on an investment in building your institution, or retaining money from an investment from building your institution? Do you know the difference? Well, I would say you don't. Tune in now to find out what I'm talking about. So, you know the difference between making money on an investment in building your school and possibly retaining those funds that you made from an investment. What's the difference? Specifically, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the funds that you make on potentially enrolling students versus the other employees who don't necessarily make dollars, but they help to retain those dollars. So I was talking to a school owner earlier, and we were discussing some of the recruiting efforts of the admissions representatives. So one of the potential representatives weren't doing as well, so she thought, as the rest of the team. So I asked her, over the last month or so, what was it that she felt that the representative wasn't doing? And real simple, in her mind, it was they weren't enrolling enough students.
But let's be clear here. There's working hard, and then there's working hard.
Well, let's make sense of this. Now, we're talking in regards to a offshore admissions representative specifically. Why? Because the overhead simply isn't as much as it would be if you had a stateside representative. So in this hypothetical analogy, we're going to say that that admission representative is being paid $1,000 a month, all right? So at $1,000 a month, I would ask, well, what, if anything, was that representative responsible for bringing into the institution that month? And hypothetically, you would say, if you were this potential school owner, you would say, well, Carlos, they brought in one student. Okay, so what's the value of that one student? Well, the one student enrolled into a specific program, and that program was valued at $5,000. Okay, $5,000. So let's take a look at this now. Are you telling me that we spent $1,000 in order to make $5,000, which in essence is $4,000 additional dollars on top of the $1,000 that we spent? Or are you telling me that we spent $1,000 and there was no income generated from the $1,000 that we spent? Because those are two different things. See, when building your institution, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind that actually add to the bottom line, or like what we like to often say is a return on the investment. Specifically, admissions representatives, for every dollar that you spend, you should be making a return on those dollars. In the years that I've operated a post-secondary institution, if I was spending $1,000 on an admission representative and that admission representative bought me one student, then I was thrilled. Why? Because of whatever the price of the programs were. If the program was $5,000, if the program was $15,000, $18,000, then I made a significant return on the investment that I made. Now, of course, if we were comparing apples to apples, then we would say that if it was a career counselor, if it was potentially a workforce development officer, if it was a director of any other department, then they wouldn't necessarily be making me a return on the dollar that I'm spending. All they would do was they would be helping to retain the dollars that were being spent. And that's a big difference. We have to get out of the mindset that if we're putting a dollar into, we got to see a 500-point return on it. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. So if you know that, specifically admissions representatives, if you know that if you put a dollar in this case, $1,000, and you're going to get back possibly $4,000 on that $1,000 that you put in, then the most probable thing that you should be looking at is possibly building out that team, building out those type of investments, as opposed to simply sitting back and saying, oh, this specific individual is not doing enough. How much more are you looking to do, right? Because on average, admissions representatives are yielding at least 3 to 5 accounts per month if we want to look at it from a sales perspective. They don't do a lot of numbers unless they're working specific with corporate events, unless they're working specific with some organization that's going to yield a number of enrollments at that time. But one-on-one enrollments, they are responsible for a bulk of the income that the institution generates on a monthly basis. And we have to address it as such. Do not get caught up on the fact that you have someone on your team directly responsible for income, whether it be an admissions representative, whether it be someone that goes out to get you corporate accounts, whatever the case may be, and they bring you in one account, one transaction, whatever. How much are you spending in order to secure that transaction? If you're spending more than the actual return, that's one conversation. But if you're spending and getting at least a 4, 5, 10 times what you spend, then that's a heck of return on the investment. So you shouldn't be comparing that individual's work ethic, that individual amount in the investment in comparison to other specifics within the organization. Those specifics being those that don't necessarily yield you a return. You know, the janitorial department, the retention department, those officers that are in charge of actually student career advisement, student success. They're not necessarily yielding you a return. All they're doing is helping to retain the dollars that were already brought in by the admissions representative, your actual salesperson. Again, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. If there's a comment or a suggestion or details that you have about this particular topic, then leave a comment down below and I will make sure that I reply to it. And until then, see you on the other side.